In the decade following the Revolutionary War in the United States, a handful of men were charged with writing a constitution that would guide this new government of a newly independent nation. Many among the former subjects of the British Crown were reticent to let a federal government have the kind of authority that a constitution was going to give to them. They had suffered as colonists under Great Britain, and so they weren't sure they ever wanted to have a federal government. In order to persuade these colonists to ratify the Constitution, James Madison presented 10 amendments, a Bill of Rights, that were intended to limit the power of government to ensure certain rights and privileges to the individual citizens of the United States. The Fourth Amendment says, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." Now, this was based on the Old English law concept called the castle doctrine that protected each person's home as their own castle, and their private thoughts, the things they believed, the way they worshiped, the things they said, or even the things they wrote. That was their business and not the business of the government unless there was probable cause to believe that there was some crime being committed. Even still, the government didn't have the right to just say, we think this guy's a bad guy, we're going to search everything in his house or life. You have to say what you're looking for. You have to get a warrant that says, this is our reason for searching, and this is what we're searching for. The castle doctrine, in the form of this Fourth Amendment, is the cornerstone of our Bill of Rights, or one of the cornerstones of our Bill of Rights at least, and it was added to the Constitution at a time when we were tiny and we were weak, and there was no track record of success of government. It was at a time when a large portion of our country was comprised of people who had been very loyal to the British Crown, who weren't necessarily all that crazy about American independence, but still, with the prospect of having maybe as many as a fourth of the people living in the United States being more British than they were American, even still, they said, you've got a right to privacy. Even if you oppose the American government, even if you're not really crazy about this project that we're engaged in, you have a right to privacy, you have a right to the papers you want to have, to the thoughts that you want to have, and the government doesn't have any right to come and check up on you. And if we could do that when we were weak, if we could do that when we were really vulnerable, it really drives home the question of why do we so willingly give up that right to privacy at this point in history? The man that seems to have our Secretary of State, John Kerry, all wound up and huffy is this young guy who used to work for the National Security Agency, Edward Snowden. Snowden saw that the government was ignoring the Fourth Amendment, ignoring probable cause, ignoring due process, ignoring the requirement to get a warrant, and were instead gathering what is called big data on absolutely everyone in the nation. Snowden grabbed some electronic copies of that data, headed for China, and then began leaking the data to reporters to show that our nation's federal government had lost its way, that had run into a moral ditch completely off the rails. Now, John Kerry tells us that Snowden is a traitor. He says that he has hurt our nation's ability to conduct intelligence gathering, that he has endangered operatives, shown terrorists our playbook, and has aided American enemies. Euphemistically, Kerry demands that Snowden come and stand trial in the same short announcement in which he announces that he's guilty. So, who wants to stand trial where the decision, the verdict, has already been rendered? To be fair, Snowden took a lot more data than he could have looked at in a lifetime. Edward Snowden has no idea what all he stole. He took tons more information than anyone could have even reviewed. He has no doubt leaked materials that he should not have leaked. He has handed useful information about our intelligence agencies, our staff, and our procedures to people that we don't want to have that information. But is he a villain or is he a whistleblower? Which was the greater treason? If you want to talk about treason, was it elected officials in high office who ignored the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, invading the privacy of citizens? Or was it a citizen who exposed massive government abuse of authority? Who's the patriot and who's the treasonist in this event? And Kerry thinks he should stop hiding in Russia, but even Snowden he's a young guy with not a lot of education and no experience as an international spy, but he does know what our government did to Bradley Manning after he leaked documents to WikiLeaks regarding crimes committed by American soldiers. Manning was locked into solitary confinement, naked, in a cold cell without bedding for a year before he was sentenced to 35 years in prison. And Kerry thinks Snowden should just come back and turn himself over to a government that is willing to torture its own citizens. We get bent out of shape about the torture of captured enemy soldiers who are suspected of having information about future terrorist attacks, but Manning was not tortured to get information. He was tortured for revenge. Our government tortured a soldier in our own country for revenge. And John Kerry thinks that Snowden should be willing to be tortured in much the same way, when he already knows that the Constitution and Bill of Rights means nothing to this government, and if he went on trial, virtually everything he would have to use for his defense would be called classified, and he would never have a shot at a real trial. John Kerry is not calling on the people who lied to Congress about weapons of mass destruction to stand trial. He has not wanted to pursue a case against the people that falsely told us that aluminum centrifuge tubes found in Iraq were being used to refine uranium for a nuclear weapon, or that there was a secret attempt at buying refined uranium to build a nuclear weapon, all of which led to the deaths of more than 4,000 American soldiers needlessly, inculcating incalculable carnage in Iraq for the past 11 years, and now apparently setting in motion carnage for the foreseeable future. Dick Cheney's appearing on talk shows, defending his record, and George Bush is painting portraits of both world leaders and his toes while sitting in the bathtub. If Kerry wants to put someone on trial, why the whistleblower and not the war criminals? Why the taxpayer-employed guards escort Bush wherever he wants to go, though you'll note that where Bush wants to go does not include many foreign countries, because he knows if he landed in most countries in the world, he would be arrested and put on trial for war crimes. But Kerry wants Snowden in a cell next to Manning. I'm not saying that either Manning or Snowden are innocent of all wrongdoing. They're not. Both of them broke oaths, leaked materials that they had sworn to defend. I'm just saying that their crimes look small in comparison to the crimes that they were trying to reveal. This whole issue of our relationship with the truth, that we simply do not appear to be allowed to even tell the truth about our environment, about global warming, about the presence of genetically modified food in our food sources. We are not even allowed. It is not legal to label foods as being genetically modified. You have to engage in hard research to actually find out what's going on with that. I will defer to my favorite historian, Howard Zinn, who said it, I think, best. You are saying, this is Howard Zinn, you are saying our problem is civil disobedience. That's not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is the numbers of people all over the world who have obeyed the dictates of leaders of their government and have gone to war, and millions have been killed because of this obedience. Our problem is that people are obedient all over the world in the face of poverty and starvation and stupidity and war and cruelty. Our problem is that people are obedient while the jails are full of petty thieves, while the grand thieves are running the country. That's our problem. Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy. This week makes 2 years that he's been in the London Ecuadorian embassy. There are people in the American government who want to arrest Assange and bring him here to put him on trial for treason. That is the imaginative reach of some of our Tea Party-supported elected officials. You're not supposed to call someone stupid in polite society. And we all know that when you think of polite, you always think of me. But there are elected officials who are so stupid that they do not know that you cannot put an Australian citizen on trial in the United States for treason. Only a citizen of the United States can commit treason against the American government. Now, you may think I'm exaggerating, but no less a person than Senator Joe Lieberman said on Fox News that he didn't understand why the Justice Department had not already charged him with treason. Now, again, I invite you to look it up. That was December 7th, 2010. Just Google it. So Assange is not hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy because of treason charges. We did what we normally do when you cannot find a legal reason to charge someone that bothers you with something. They come up with a sex charge. And Julian Assange is evidently a real jerk, and he did have unprotected sex. Not nearly as serious, however, as you recall a few of these incidents where the president's Secret Service agents that traveled abroad with the President of the United States were becoming so intoxicated they couldn't find their way back home from the brothel where they were spending the night with prostitutes, none of whom were charged with a crime, none of whom were either demoted or fired because of what was clearly dereliction of duty and illegal behavior. But Julian Assange is stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy because if he set one foot out, and even there was an airplane where the Ecuadorian president was flying from Europe back to Ecuador, and we forced his plane down to search his plane to see if Assange was hiding on the plane. That's how aggressive we are to catch him allegedly for having had unprotected sex with a willing partner. So I'm just saying our use of authority in these cases is absolutely extreme. But Assange is still stuck there with no known hope of changing that because he is in the crosshairs of a government that has shown that it has no problems with torturing people for a long time just to show them that you cannot defy the monarchical authority of this democracy. You have every right to wonder why I'm all exercised about Manning, Assange, and Snowden today. But if it's not obvious, it was this bit of scripture from today's lecture reading, prescribed long ago for this Sunday in what is called the A cycle of the lectionary for the Sunday that is called Proper 7. Sounds better in Latin. Long ago, long before Assange, Manning, and Snowden were born, our church leaders carved up the Bible into bits they wanted read in church services for the foreseeable future. So we hear Jeremiah's hand-wringing about the fact that nobody likes him. Jeremiah is friendless in Jerusalem. The king thinks he's a traitor. The priests think he's a heretic. The population demands that he be put in chains and thrown into a dungeon in the basement of the Ecuadorian embassy. Why? Why? Because he dared to tell the truth. Because he dared to tell the people that their government was lying to them, that their military was lying to them. Does any of this sound familiar? This text is being read in Catholic churches, Methodist, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Lutheran, UCC, and disciple churches all across North, Central, and South America, and Europe, and Northern Africa today. And I'm afraid that in almost every pulpit, it is a history lesson. Jeremiah knew that the armies of Babylon would sweep over. They're telling him what happened way back when, as if telling the truth was only dangerous in the 5th century BCE, and it has suddenly become safe in our world. What Jeremiah is saying is that he's tired of keeping the truth to himself. He didn't want people saying that he was a traitor. He didn't want his neighbors to dislike him. He wanted to be able to go to a coffee shop and talk about Obamacare and Benghazi and how Obama wants to take our guns. But the truth burned inside of him when he tried to keep it in, and it tastes like honey when he says it out loud. We all want to fit in. We all want to avoid conflict. We would all like to have nice holidays with our in-laws and pleasant relationships at the office and neighborly cookouts on the 4th of July. And we would like to not become targets of the NSA, the CIA, or the FBI. But there is a price to be paid. The 20th century Hindu teacher J. Krishnamurti said, "It is no measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society." I sincerely hope that in this time in American history that you will be among the most maladjusted people in this nation. Popularity is overrated, and honesty is far too ignored.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Rev. Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.